to, or basically teach an anatomy class and teach everybody like what muscle group does what and where it is on their body. And that basically stemmed into a bigger idea of like, well, what if we do a little bit more of a series and make it a little bit more formal? So here we are, and we pulled Dave Paczkowski in as well. So Dr. Steve Derrington, Dr. Dave Paczkowski, if you guys want to just start with you, Steve, do a quick intro, just real basic on who you are and what you do.
Sure. So, Steve Derrington. I'm a physician in North San Diego County here. I do everything. I do what's called interventional orthopedics, which is basically doing injections, not surgery, for orthopedic issues. We use primarily things that are called orthobiologics. So that's platelets and bone marrow stem cells and adipose stem cells and things along those lines to keep people from having steroid injections, keep people from having surgery, and get people back in the gym and staying active.
Nice. And then Dave, what do you do?
Yeah, Dr. Paczkowski, physical therapist, owner of Inside Out Strength and Performance. It's myself and my wife, Lindsay, who own the business. And similar to Steve, but more on the movement side of things, we help people get out of pain, recover from injury, and hopefully avoid surgery, avoid pain medication. Commonly work with a lot of overuse injuries, everything from active individuals to people who maybe weren't active and trying to become active, but we bridge the gap then between taking people from recovering from injury and then back into performance and back into the gym.
Awesome. And then if you're on the Facebook page, you probably know who I am. I'm Casey Parlett, head coach at CrossFit 760. Have a background in coaching and training, and I'm not really that important for this call. I'm just going to kind of act as the liaison and let the two doctors tell you guys what's really going on, and I'll throw my 2 cents in kind of the practical world. But what we want to do today, number one, if you guys have questions, please feel free to jump on and ask questions. We'll have some Q&A time at the end. If you guys are enjoying it, let us know. If you want us to make sure we hit something, throw that in there, all that kind of stuff. But we're going to just kind of start and kick off and really talk this first week about the squat movements and the movements with a hinge pattern. So in real basic terms, bringing your hips below your knees, standing back up to full extension would be any squat variation, whether that's a regular air squat, back squat, front squat, overhead squat. Get a little bit more creative, throw a thruster in there. There's still a squat component to it. And then we also start to look at lunges, different lunge variations, step ups, any movement that's going to basically take the hip through that range. And then the other side of it is the hinge pattern. So deadlift, snatch, clean, kettlebell swing, good morning, any hinge type movement pattern. So Steve, let's do this. If you want to just start where you feel is fitting with kind of a basic anatomy rundown of what's going on in a squat, what are the big movers, what are the secondary movers, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure Dave's going to do some great demonstrating with this also, and we'll kind of go back and forth. But I think most people, when they think about squats, they think about their quads, and really that's not the primary muscle. It's really your glutes and your hamstrings that are driving a lot of that movement. And one of the things I'm going to kind of go over and try to not get into too many kind of just medical details, but a lot of these muscles aren't as simple as we kind of think they are. They've got broad attachments and origins, and as I think Dave will talk about, they cross different joints and have different movements depending on, I don't know if it's an open chain, closed chain, but some of the mechanics of how those muscles function change depending on what you're doing. But the first one that I think most people do a lot of leg workouts, they like working their butt muscles. They like the glutes. The main one is going to be gluteus maximus. That's our biggest one. That attaches. I don't know if I can show this. I hope I can use this app because I think this app is really cool. I think I have licensing for it, but it demonstrates the glute muscles there. So as we kind of put the muscles on, you can get in here. That's the gluteus maximus, and the kind of yellow part in the middle is where it originates, and then over on the side is where it attaches pretty simplistically. So you can see the white here, that's fascia, that's connective tissue. So the glutes actually have some attachments to some of our rector, like our back kind of paraspinal muscles, as well as the gluteus medius, we'll talk about in a second, but also has lots of bony attachments, basically on the backside of the pelvis and the sacrum. But then it attaches, connects to another muscle and attaches to some soft tissue, also attaches to the thigh bone really high up, but then it continues through the IT band across the knee. But what that muscle primarily does is hip extension. But it can also do some other kind of subtle range of motion, and that, like I said, it crosses across the knee. So it's a primarily hip extensor, but it also has some knee stabilizing components as well. Anything to add to that, Dave?
Nope, keep going with it.
Okay. And then the next kind of main muscle that you're working if you're doing squats or squat variations are the hamstrings. And most people probably don't realize there's actually 4 different hamstring muscles. And we can kind of show here again, we're looking at from the back side of the person here, and we kind of move around. I'm doing this backwards here, but there's the front, there's the back. So biceps femoris is one of the 2 biceps muscles. There's a short and a long head, and most of these attach at something called our ischial tuberosity, which is our sit bone. This spot here that, anytime you sit on a hard surface, you feel that bone kind of contacting the chair. That is what those muscles, 3 of those 4 muscles attach to. One of them actually attaches on the thigh itself, and then both of those are going to cross and actually insert in the knee, or below the knee. 2 of them on the inside, 2 of them on the outside. So they do kind of a couple different movements. Because it goes from the pelvis across the hip and across the knee, it is a hip extensor, and it's also a knee flexor. And so it kind of has some complex components to it, but it is something that, depending on what movements you're doing and what context you're doing them, it's kind of achieving different movements. That's things that I think Dave will probably get into, but as we get into some other stuff, there's different ways to stretch these, to activate them, and when they're not working right, it's causing other muscles to overwork, and that's what brings people in to see Dave and myself when those things get overused and misused.
Awesome, Steve. So, and then Dave, if you can jump in and hit cool. So glutes, hamstrings, what do they do? Like, what does that flexor and extensor look like? Practical application, and what are some of the things that we need to know about them in order to move as well as possible?
Yeah, so and like Steve was touching on, with these being, especially when we look at something like the hamstrings being, when we get these multi-joint muscles, to properly stretch and use these, have to be aware that because they cross 2 joints, have to make sure that you're aware of what's going on above and below it. So these will run on the back side of the thigh, but being aware of what back position, core position is doing, and also what knee position is doing. So if we think, so if we're doing our traditional hamstring stretch, if we just fold forward and we're rounded the lower back, we're only stretching potentially one side of that where it crosses at the knee. So we have to pay attention to not just is our knee straight and locked out to get the full stretch, but also are we tilting, keeping proper back position as we fold forward. So instead of just folding forward this way, making sure to fully get the hamstring stretch, making sure you're not tucking those hips under based on where Steve was talking about that those muscles cross at. So that's just a note on stretching. That's going to apply across the board with this whole series we're doing. So that's why knowing multi-joint muscles or single joint muscles becomes important, because both of how to best strengthen them and how to stretch them. If you know that it crosses 2 joints, then you have to be aware of what the joints are doing above and below to, but if your goal is stretching or improving mobility, making sure you're creating tension on both ends of that. And if your goal is strengthening, making sure that you're not just strengthening the knee flexion part of it and missing the hip extension part of it. So A quick example of that would be if you're lying on your stomach doing a leg curl, like leg curl machine, and you're not moving at the hip as well, then you're just getting the knee flexion part of it versus doing something like a bridge up where you're on an exercise ball, your legs are straight, you're bridging up, you're getting that full hip extension, and then you're curling the ball in as well, is how you hit both pieces of that. So that's looking at the hamstring specifically, but that applies across the board with whatever we're looking at. As it relates to the squat and deadlift, though, so these muscles you can see are going to be very active with both controlling on the way down the movement and then shortening, and we'll talk more about this later, but shortening and then explosively driving the barbell, the load up, whatever you're doing in that sense.
Cool. So that's kind of like this basic rundown. And we might have some people that are like, yeah, I'm really into the anatomy and the science and all that stuff. But what everybody wants to know, and I can sit here and talk from my perspective, but I think it's really interesting coming from you guys, is, okay, cool, we get that the glutes and the hamstrings, flex the knee, extend the hip. What does that look like, and how does that help? Like, how does knowing that help me if I'm squatting or deadlifting or doing a kettlebell swing? How do I use that information to improve my performance? Dave, you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, so that, again, tying this all back into position, and especially what you hear Casey cueing in the gym, when we tie it back into position and movement, that's how knowing these things becomes important, because if you take something like a kettlebell swing, if you're doing that swing, so the same thing in the hamstrings we were talking about, so the weight comes through, if you're not paying attention to back position and you just let the back round in the bottom position there, then all of a sudden we're shifting the work from our hamstrings, so these muscles that are meant to generate force, are meant to control that, to the lower back. So we have people that come in, they're like, my back hurts when I deadlift, my back hurts when I squat. And usually that can be tied back to what's happening at the back and hip position. So lack of control here means that you're not stabilizing those muscles that are meant to be the prime movers in that motion. So the hamstrings aren't working as effectively, the glutes aren't working as effectively. We shift the work to the lower back, which can handle that for a day, a week, a month, a year, but eventually those back muscles aren't designed to be the primary movers in a movement like that. So by knowing that it's supposed to be the hamstrings, and by knowing that the hamstrings are properly working by being in a good position here, good position here, good position here, then that locked and loaded position in our swing, in our deadlift, in any of those setups is setting us up for success, not just from protecting our back, protecting these overuse injuries, which is of extreme importance, because if you stay healthy and stay injury-free, you can train for longer, you get better results for longer, you can be more consistent for longer. But from a short-term performance standpoint too, you're going to be able to move more weight, you're going to be able to move that weight more explosively and more effectively as well.
Yeah, and as you're kind of talking about, hamstrings and glutes, we haven't talked about quads yet, and there's, obviously a reason for that, because they're not really the primary muscles that we should be using here. But a lot of people, if they're either changing their hip and pelvis position or their body weight is shifted, they end up being really overusing the quads. You're not activating the glutes and hamstrings because they're not in the ideal position. The back ends up compensating, and you end up, first of all, having your quads be super fried and get really tired after doing not that much work. And you don't need to get too much into like injuries, but getting that arthritis behind your kneecap because you're overusing the quads, and that's just basically driving your kneecap onto your rest of your thigh. And over time, like you said, a day, a week, a month, a year, you can do fine with that. But over time, you're going to wear that down. And if you can be aware of the movements that you're supposed to be doing and the muscles you're supposed to be using and not relying on different ones, then you can continue training and stay healthy versus working really, really hard but not doing it right and then getting yourself injured. You got to step back, you got to take a break, you got to do whatever, and then you're kind of going this back and forth. I'm healthy, I'm not healthy, because you're not paying attention to the mechanics.
Nice, guys. And then, so while we're there, and then we'll kind of start talking about some of the balance and imbalance stuff that will kind of lead into more of the injury stuff. But Steve, if you want to kind of jump in and let's talk about the quad. What does the quad do? what's going on there, and then we'll kind of go through that same pattern, Dave.
Yeah, so the quad's kind of a cool muscle. Most people think of it just as, your, and so they can get here, where it's the knee extension. You got quad muscles on the front here, and you think it's just going to extend here, because most of it starts on the thigh, goes through your kneecap, and then attaches here on your shin. But one of the quad muscles actually attaches up in your pelvis, and it's one of your hip flexor muscles. So it's a primary knee extensor, but it's also a hip flexor for that one muscle. So that's one of those multi-joint, multifunctional muscles that, depending on what kind of exercise you're doing, what body position you're in, you're going to be using it differently. And like Dave was saying, you're talking about open chain knee, the hamstring curls, same kind of thing. I'm sure you're not a huge fan of open chain, just knee extension, because it's just isolating, part of the muscle, not really using it very functionally.
Yeah, no, so the open joint, like you're talking about, is typically speaking, the limb not in contact with the ground. So you're moving the foot. In that case, you're kicking the leg out, versus something like a squat where you're pushing through the ground. Your body's moving, the load is staying, or where you're pushing off of is relatively staying fixed. And where this becomes important, like Steve's talking about, is making sure that you're not biasing too much of one versus the other. And thankfully in the CrossFit gym, this isn't the case so much. You're not working with machines that maybe in your conventional Globo type gym, but like Steve's talking about, there's still more of the likelihood though for either side to side compensation or front side of the body versus back side of the body compensations, which tend to lead to a lot of those problems. And as it relates to the quads, while some actually do have weakness in the quads, the majority of people tend to be more, for lack of a better word, we'll call it quad dominant. And that's going to lead to a lot of lower back and knee issues that Steve was mentioning earlier. And to address this, being aware of movement again is knowing what positions to be in, how to lead with sending the hips back is going to help load up our posterior chain or backside, those hammies and glutes. And there should be this nice balance between those two. You're never going to take one muscle completely out of the equation. Even if you're primarily moving hamstrings, glutes, the quads are still working to some degree if you're extending the knee. But how you're moving will dictate how much stress is going through which joints and how well of a position you're in for hitting a lift, for performing it successfully. So all those things come into play, and we can maybe a little later get into specific variations of what's going to bias more quads and more posterior chain naturally, looking at from taking people from deadlift to squat variations. But those are a couple things to keep in mind in relation to the quads and the balance between those two.
Awesome. So that's kind of our basic big movers of our lower body: glutes, hamstrings, quads. Dave, because you're standing up and you have the space, if you can run through just a simple squat and on the descent, just kind of walk through like what muscles are doing what, and then same thing on the extension, and then maybe same idea in a deadlift, just so people can kind of wrap their head around like, okay, I'm in this position. These are the muscles that are doing what.
Yeah. So with the squat, as we're lowering here, so thinking about, make sure we can get set up here. So as we're descending down, and quick point I want to talk on before we get into this, the concentric, eccentric, isometric part is an important piece to touch on before we get too much into this. I don't want to go into too much detail on this, but concentric is muscle shortening. We'll use the bicep as an example because it's an easy thing to see. So if you make your bicep curl here, the concentric piece of that is the bicep shortening. So you're pulling it up. Isometric would be if you're holding something here and just hanging onto it, the muscle's not lengthening or shortening. And then eccentric being the control down of that. So as we look at something, as we get into some of these squat deadlift variations here, the muscles as we're lowering down, that's the eccentric piece. So those muscles are lengthening. They're still working. The same muscles are working on the way down as they are on the way up, but one is going to be more the control of that. So they're lengthening, you're controlling the weight on the way down. And then as those muscles shorten on the way up, that's how you're explosively going up from that movement. So just wanted to touch on that quickly because that becomes important. It's not that different muscles are working on the way down or the way up necessarily, but it's just how they're functioning more so than which ones are working. So we'll talk through some of that here. So as we're dropping into a squat, so we're lowering down here, we're getting into that bottom position, and then our angle is here. So our quads are working, but we want, by loading those hips back and sending those hips down, we're loading up those hammies, glutes from that position there. So in that, by sending the hips back, that's helping to tension out those hamstrings and those glutes. The quads aren't meant to be the one primarily descending. Now, if we squat down and we did like a catcher squat or something, so if we were just to, for exaggerating, really load those knees forward, that's shifting all the work to those quads, because the joint that's loaded first is the one that's being, the muscles that are being loaded first. So if we push those knees forward to start, then those quads are being overloaded versus sending hips back. Sorry to move the camera a bunch of times here. Versus sending those hips back to initiate the movement is what's going to help tension those hamstrings, those glutes in the way that they're designed to be working. And so we'll talk through kind of squat variations as well. So the more upright our position is, the more, in theory, you're going to be loading the knees more, and as your body tips forward, is going to be loading more of your posterior chain. So overhead squat, upright position, a little more quads as we get into different loaded positions. So so front squat, more upright, high bar back squat, low bar back squat, and then getting into our deadlift variations as well. So as we get into a sumo deadlift, we're a little more upright here. It's going to be a little more, not that it's quad dominant, but a little more quad dominant compared to something like our conventional deadlift, where we're hinging completely from the hips, and then our stiff leg deadlift and good morning variations as well, where those knees are more locked out. We're really getting into that forward position there. So that's kind of taken through the progression of from more quad dominant, knee dominant movements to more what we call hip dominant movements.
Awesome, Dave. Thank you. So, yeah, and I'll kind of touch on all this as we kind of get towards the end, but big thing on that is just kind of understanding for anybody that's watching that's not really like quite up on their anatomy, terminology, and all that stuff. But basically, the farther you hinge forward, the more your hamstrings and glutes are going to be doing the work. The more upright you are, the less hip hinge you have, the more your quads are going to be involved. It's kind of an easy way to look at it. So you know that if you're trying to work your hamstrings and your glutes and your torso is upright, you're missing what you're trying to do. So what we want to do is get into a back squat or a low bar back squat to really fire up the hamstrings and the glutes. That's why when we talk deadlift, we're really looking at the posterior chain. Yes, the quads have that little piece where the knee extends, but the big piece of the puzzle there is the backside. And then we talked about, or Dave talked a little bit about like some of the different variations. If you're trying to work your quads, right? We have some imbalance stuff that we're trying to work through, which we'll talk about. That's when we start to get ourselves more upright to make sure that we're hitting the appropriate muscle group. So
one more thing, too, guys. So looking at our accessory work too as a way to, because sometimes it's hard if you're lifting a lot of weight, it's hard to maybe adjust. If you're used to back squatting a certain way, it's going to take maybe a long time to go from a high bar to a low bar back squat if you're used to one versus the other. But using accessory work as a way to target those imbalances. So if you find that out of the bottom position of the squat, you're doing the whole the stripper pull out of the bottom, so you're here, the hips shoot up first, and then you stand up, kind of that good morning type of squat. A lot of times that's actually can be quad weakness out of that bottom position, which, so not everyone falls into a quad or hip dominant type pattern, but if your hips shoot up first, then you might need to target a little more quad work. So with something like a step up or a lunge, making sure you're staying a little more upright and actually not being too driving through the heels, so making sure you're balanced and driving through the arch, making sure that knee's extending and you're extending everything straight up versus dropping the upper body forward.
Awesome. So now that we kind of have like our big primary movers, hamstrings, glutes, quads. One of the things that I think most people that are working out, especially in a CrossFit setting, they've heard the term about muscle imbalances, and imbalances or weaknesses are going to cause injury. So Steve, like as we start to get into this, what are some of the things that you see due to weak hamstrings, weak glutes, quads turned off? Like where are the injury sites and what's causing that?
I mean, it can be all over the place because I see patients with spine problems, with hip problems, with knee problems, even foot ankle problems. And like he was kind of talking about back position and good strong core. We kind of haven't really said the word yet. We'll get into it more, obviously. But that back position and that back excessive back arch, people that don't have the good, whether it's mobility, whether it's muscle activation, and are trying to do squats, they might be having a hard time getting to the good position, so they're hyperextending and they're putting their back in a very vulnerable position. And again, over years and years of poor training, they end up, injuring a disc. They end up getting pinched nerves where they got pain that goes down the leg. They end up overloading their facet joints, which are the small joints in our back. Any combination of those things are very common. And as I take all my patients through very, very simple movement mechanics, but most patients, and this is with knee problems and with back problems, I ask them to squat. And I see them do this all the time. I mean, they have no control over all. Like Dave was talking about, trying to not get too far over your feet, where your knees are so far forward, so the quads are activating, and then they're just making all these different compensation patterns that are throwing different body areas off. We kind of talked about the arthritis behind the knee developing, pain in the back, and all kinds of different back pathologies. And I think we'll have a chance to get into one more glute muscle or kind of pair of muscles that are important, because I see a lot of knee problems and people have a hard time controlling their knees and they can't keep them straight. Their knees keep collapsing in, and then that's overloading one part of your knee joint. And again, over time, that can injure things like a meniscus, or can develop arthritis in different parts of the knee. Because they're not able to activate those muscles correctly, they're just not able to maybe just recruit them. It may not be a strength issue. It may just be an issue of activating them properly.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's kind of get into that. Let's talk briefly, kind of like a cool overview of all of our kind of secondary muscles, the glute med, the glute medius, any of the other muscles through the hamstrings and the quads.
Yeah. So I think the most important one is probably glute med and glute min. These are deep to the main gluteus maximus muscle. They attach on the pelvis also, and then the kind of the pointy part on the side of your hip that most people can feel, that's where those two tendons attach. And they do a couple different things. One, on this right side here, this is my right, it abducts, but it also externally rotates. So the issue that most people have when they're doing squats, and this is something that Casey talks to me about all the time, you get down and you start doing this collapsed knee because you're not activating these muscles. And again, over time, that's going to lead to lots of different problems. So those muscles, and being able to incorporate them and being able to control them as you're going through some of these, big movements where you've got the main muscles that everyone's kind of focused on. But you got to be able to kind of be aware of those smaller muscles that need to be able to be recruited so you can do that movement right.
Yeah, I was muted. Go ahead, Dave, go ahead and add in kind of where your head goes when you start thinking about some of the smaller muscle groups.
Yeah, so there's, like Steve was saying, there's a lot that goes into it, and that's where assessment of how you're moving is the starting point for that. So seeing just globally of how you're moving, how you're squatting, and how you're hinging, and then based on that, diving into testing these specific muscles in terms of strength, in terms of flexibility of them. Because that's something we haven't touched much on either, too, is your mobility is going to play a role in how well these muscles are functioning. So if you might be plenty strong in an area, but if you simply don't have the range of motion to get into these positions, that's another thing that can cause these overuse things, these improper imbalances that can occur. So making sure adequate mobility at joints above and below where you're moving. So for squat, ankles, knees, hips, all need to be in there. If we look at overhead squat, thoracic spine, shoulder girdle as well. So the mobility side's important to take into account, and then also all those areas are working together to some degree. It's a very dynamic system. We're very dynamic in that nature. Like Steve's saying, we have our hammies, quads, glutes that are primarily pushing the load, but all these secondary muscles are the drive the knees out cue. Core is helping to keep the spine in a nice neutral alignment, and all these things are working together or should be working together. And any weak link in that chain, whether that's a stiffness issue or a weakness issue, can cause compensations in movement, which, like we've been harping on, could potentially lead to improper loading of the joints. But for those that don't have any pain, they're like, hey, no, I feel great. This will harm your performance as well. So you're not going to be able to run as fast. You're not going to be able to jump as high. You're not going to be able to push as much load explosively because your body's not working in the capacity that's designed to.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of where I want to go, and why I felt like this whole thing was so important is getting people that don't have the anatomy and the science and the biomechanics background, or even just the basic fitness understanding of any sort, is like everybody. And I think I used this example when we did the push-up thing, Dave, but like bodybuilders, like people harp on bodybuilding a lot. But what bodybuilders are really good at is targeting the appropriate muscle groups when they're training. Like when they're doing a bicep curl, like they know exactly what they should be feeling and what muscle should be doing what movement. So when I look at it from a coach's perspective in a gym, whether I'm coaching a CrossFit class, I'm working with the individual athlete, or anything else that I'm coaching, what I really would love people to understand is like, hey, when I say I want you to pull your knees out, when you pull your knees out, this is the muscle that you should feel. Like you should feel your glutes turn on, especially that glute med. When you're struggling to stand up out of the bottom of a squat and I'm telling you, hey, your quads are weak, we need to go do some quad accessory movement, and I give them to you, you need to be able to feel what your quads are. So my hope with all of this is by educating people and teaching them, like, this is what your quad is, this is what it does, this is why it's important, this is what your glutes are, and all that kind of stuff, that they start to connect the dots, that when they're doing a back squat and the coach tells them, hey, pull your knees out, and then they come up and they reset themselves on the next one and they make sure that they feel their glutes turn on the way that they're supposed to, or hey, send your hips back. They're like, oh man, I know I'm really trying to work my hamstrings and I keep letting my knees push forward, so I need to go back. So I guess for you guys, what are the things that you recommend people are doing while they're moving? What do you recommend coaches do to help put their athletes in the best position possible through all this?
Yeah, I think a couple things that come to mind is a lot of times it's just a lack of awareness of these things, and that's where having a good coach comes into play. Of if you haven't grown up in the gym or grown up around weightlifting and you're relatively new, and for some people new could be even within 5 years, when we think about experienced weightlifters are decades of working on these things. Having a good coach to be able to spot those things, because sometimes it's just a matter of like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to have my knees out there, and I didn't know that's what I was supposed to feel. And having a coach that can spot those things and know how that is different in a squat versus hinge versus Olympic lifting versus those things is first importance. But if you're just not getting the hang of it too, so sometimes it's a matter of just like, oh, I didn't know that, I just have to feel it, now I got it. A lot of times though, as I know Casey's in the gym, it can be more complicated than that. That's what makes it harder for coaches, is we see this thing that we know needs fixing, but you can try giving them a cue, you can try giving them some hands-on feedback quick to see if they can feel it. You can try these different cueing techniques, but sometimes they just don't work. And that's a couple of things that come to mind is making sure you're working on the right things and giving the right cue. So adjusting the cue to the person, but also making sure you're working on, you're not fighting you're not trying to create strength when there's actually a mobility problem, or vice versa, trying to give them mobility when it's actually a strength or stability problem. So peeling back the layers, knowing what's actually going on, and cueing appropriately. And sometimes it just takes the accessory work. I love accessory work and love corrective work, just because these things can really help people to feel it. If you grab a bandit, you do a banded monster walks, and you walk far enough, you're going to feel where your glute med is if you're doing them. Even if you're not doing them 100% correctly, like eventually your glutes are going to start screaming at you. And that's where using those things, being like, wow, it's cramping. That feels like someone just punched me in the side of the head. Okay, that's what I need to feel now when I'm doing these things. It's a good way to drill in those and reinforce those things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the banded hip walks, because I love that exercise. It kind of sucks because it fires them up really, really good. But that's one of the things when I have patients, especially now, that have sometimes issues just getting into a PT gym that may not be offering, telehealth options. You can give them a band, and you can, I show them those exercises. They can kind of understand, because as they're showing me some of the mechanics they're doing wildly incorrectly, that's something that might be a simple, easy thing to correct, and then you kind of build on top of that as you identify more things. From a coaching standpoint, one of the things that I really like that Casey usually does, especially when you're warming up back squats, super lightweight, so you're not worried about, can I move this? But it's like on 5 reps of warming up, like on rep 1, you're like, send your hips back, think about that. On rep 2, you're giving them something else to think about. So for each person who's there and has different limitations, they can kind of go, okay, hey, here's what I need to think about. Here's my cue. And then you grab on to 1 or 2 that are the ones that speak to you more. So you're not overloading your mind and trying to overthink while you're doing the movement, but you take that 1 or 2, mental pieces that help you do that movement correctly. And then over time, obviously, you reinforce that and you go, now I know what that feels like. Now I know my mechanic should be like. Now I know where I should be feeling this. And then you're that much better of a squatter or whatever the movement is, over time.
Yeah, and I think so. Like as a coach, it's something that I've found over the years, and I think most kids at 15, 16 years old when they're going to the gym, like back when 20 years ago or whatever it was, we weren't doing CrossFit. Like we were going in, we were doing back and biceps, chest and tris. Like we were doing leg day, we were doing like cardio and abs, and what that did was it taught me not only like how to activate the appropriate muscles through the movements that I'm after, but it also started to build up that ability to activate the smaller muscles as well. So like it teaches you that. And one of the things when I first got into CrossFit, especially started to coach it, I took it for granted a lot. And I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about this, but I took it for granted that all of my smaller and accessory muscles were developed from years of bodybuilding, from years of playing unilateral sports with rotational elements to them. Whereas people that just do CrossFit and that's their sport and that's all they have, they get really good at using the big movers, their quads, their glutes, their hamstrings, their abdominals, all of that stuff. But then what happens is they get into a conditioning workout where they're ramping up the intensity, and their intensity's through the roof. They're really great at pushing that level. But all of a sudden, the big movers are only going to last so long, and the secondary muscles are going to have to start to take over a little bit. And when the secondary muscles aren't there and you're standing up out of the bottom of a back squat and everything, all your big movements or big movers shut down and those little movers aren't there, you have nothing. And that's where I've seen a lot of injuries come from, even something as simple as like a one-legged squat, like a pistol squat. So any thoughts from your guys' end on that?
I think just reiterating what we've been talking about, being in better positions, having the joint stabilizers working, the prime movers working together. That's how our body's designed to work. So from a performance standpoint, whether it's conditioning, whether it's strength, whether it's the injury prevention side of things, those need to be working in harmony. They need to be working together to move better, to feel better, to perform better. So I think you just have to make sure that you're using the gym as a way, and I like what Steve mentioned earlier with the warm-up sets, and like you do so well, Casey, is that use warm-up sets, use these times under sub-max loads, use these times where you're moving, use your cool-down work, use your warm-up work intentionally to move in a way that promotes that. And that's where you're going to be practicing on it, because when you're breathing fire and Fran, or you're doing a 1-rep back squat, isn't the time to be like, I really should, I don't know, I got to send my hips back a little more. Maybe I need to push my knees out more in there. No, you're pushing on those types of things. So use those other times in the gym as ways to work on these things and build that balance that we need for proper function.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think Casey and I, we talked about this before, but this is where it comes down to the athlete themselves being smart, but also who they surround themselves with, their coach or whatever they're using for instruction to be smart with how they're programming, what kind of movements they're doing, and not just focusing on the big movers, but having a varied enough routine and using those like you said, the warm up or the cool down exercises to be able to build that foundation. So it's not just the big movers they're really, really good, but the whole thing is working like it's supposed to. Because as much as I know how to what these muscles feel like, and I obviously know where they run and how they move and what they do, when I'm in the gym, I don't want to have to think. And if you have good instruction, you can give me a cue and I can turn that back on and kind of use that and just keep moving, versus if all you know how to do is just do the main workouts and don't spend the time before or after, putting yourself in a better, well-rounded athletic position. That's where those limitations, that's where those injuries happen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with both of you guys, and I think that's something when people ask about CrossFit, and I don't want to make this about CrossFit, but people ask, and I'm like, well, not all CrossFit gyms are the same, right? We always talk about that whole thing, and fortunately for everybody that gets coached by us and uses our program, they've got a much different experience from what most people see as CrossFit. And, like at the end of the day, I think as much as we want exercising to be simple, there is some depth to it. And especially if you're trying to add intensity to anything, whether it's running, cycling, swimming, as soon as you start to add intensity, like mechanics are going to start to go away. So that work beforehand, that technique work, the prehab stuff all needs to be in place. Like you, in a sense, almost have to earn your intensity to get to that point where you actually want to go. Otherwise, you end up like most people that are doing CrossFit on their own in a gym without proper coaching, and it's just day one. Let's see how hard I can go, and let's see how long I can last. And what you guys have been saying is essentially you're going to break down at some point, because you can move well or you can move terribly for a day and be fine, even a week, 2 years. But at some point, they're going to end up in both of your guys' offices and have a bad taste in their mouth. CrossFit hurt me. CrossFit did that. And it's not just CrossFit, right? Like you see people at 24-hour fitness and Gold's Gym, yoga classes. So Steve, I'd be curious, and even Dave, like people kind of miss that even in like yoga. Like people don't realize the injury rate from yoga related movement. So if you guys can talk to that a little bit, and then we'll start wrapping up.
I see most of my patients are pretty active and they want to be active and they're motivated. I don't see a lot of people that are just kind of sitting around and got injured some other way. But they're doing all kinds of activities, and I guess it comes down to how you're doing them and what intensity you're doing, and kind of how you're going through whatever that activity is. Because there's a couple different studies that have come out a couple of years ago. Not to talk about CrossFit too much, but that the rate of injury for CrossFit really wasn't any different than powerlifting or other kind of competitive sports. It obviously just comes down to how intensely you're working out. Anytime that you're going really, really hard for a long enough period of time, things can break down, especially because of the things you've been talking about. If you're not doing that accessory work and really building that good foundation, around the main kind of exciting part of your workout or your competition or whatever it is.
Nice. Dave?
Yeah, I like the study Steve mentioned is even running and yoga have similar injury rates compared to CrossFit. There's these myths around different activities being better, but it just shows us that we're meant to be more balanced than we are. If we focus on any one specific activity, we do that too much. There is a normal physiology we can't outrun too. You can try and max out your back squat every day for, you can go for a period of time and hit that hard and then go try and do all this extra squat accessory work and do this. If you do that every day, even if you're a perfect mover and you have good balance of these muscles, intelligent programming is going to trump perfect movement if you're not being smart of it. So there's no one good activity for yoga. If you're only doing yoga, you're going to develop imbalances. If you're only doing CrossFit as a workout, if you're only doing bodybuilding, if you're only doing these things, all these imbalances can occur. So making sure you're properly managing how you're doing your work outside the gym should be stuff to complement your work inside the gym. So if you're hammering your CrossFit workouts, mobility, recovery, some of that yoga stuff might be more beneficial. If you're only doing yoga classes, you probably benefit from taking some CrossFit classes and getting stronger. So there's not people ask for that perfect activity. If there's one perfect activity, you'd see everyone doing it. So you see people have success with running, you see people have success with yoga, with CrossFit, with bodybuilding. So there's not one thing that's a magical movement or exercise or program, but there's very much intelligent programs and smart programs within those different realms that make people successful.
Nice. So our Facebook live feed, I don't know why, but it wouldn't stay logged in. So I'll ask a question, but I have it recorded, so I'll get it posted up as soon as we're done. Glutes. That's where I'm like, what's the best thing that I can do to figure out how to turn my glutes on in a squat and a deadlift?
I like starting, so if they can't feel it in a compound movement, just break the movement down. So starting from the ground is a great place for people. So starting with bridges, clamshells, open chain movements can be effective for teaching that. Adding a band, doing those monster walks. If you can't, no amount of cueing is getting it in squat and deadlift, breaking the movement down, putting people back on the ground, on the floor where there's less of a postural demand. You don't have to recruit quite as much of those, not as much moving pieces, if you will. So breaking the movement down and just isolating those muscles can be a good way to help build that back up. And then always translating that back into the movements, or retesting something like the squat, seeing if people can feel it better.
Nice. And then Steve, for you, so kind of that same idea is like somebody asks you whether they're in the office or just kind of out somewhere, and they're like, I just realized that my glutes don't work and my back hurts all the time. Anytime that I'm squatting or deadlifting, I feel it in my back. Like, what am I feeling? What's going on there?
I mean, it's probably coming down to some kind of it could. I mean, most people that come into me have some kind of anatomical problem, whether it's a joint, whether it's ligament, tendon, whether it's something in the back of the disc. But I think people on the street could still do the same things, but it may just be overuse and basically poor posture and mechanics being more the issue, where most people on the street would benefit more from Dave than they would from me, which is good for Dave. But I think that just it's hard, and I think if you can stick someone in front of a mirror and just have them see, or have them just get their camera out and record it and see how they move, because most people, they're still developing these abnormal patterns and they don't realize they're moving abnormally, and over days, weeks, months, years, that just gets ingrained in you, and then you go, well, now I'm even squatting down to pick my shoes up off the ground. But they don't realize that they've been doing it wrong for a really long time. So if you can kind of step back from yourself, which is either a mirror, having someone else watch you record it, and then compare that to what a good example is, they can kind of see and maybe understand a little more about what they're doing wrong. And if they can fix that themselves, great. Otherwise, looking for for help and for somebody to help them with those movements is gonna help. Is likely gonna help get them into a lot less pain, if not no pain.
Nice. All right, guys. So we've been on 50 minutes. We've talked about a lot of stuff. Goes by quickly. What just kind of big takeaway for people? Like, if they didn't hear anything else, if they heard one message from you as far as understanding glutes, hamstrings, quads, maybe some secondary movers, like what would you want to tell somebody about this? Dave, you want to go?
Okay. Yeah, so I think so knowing you don't have to know all the specific muscles, but you do need to. I mean, there's a responsibility to have a base understanding of what your movement should look like in these different movements. And by moving that way, you're going to likely properly recruit those muscles to a much larger degree than you would if you weren't aware of those things. And then using a coach, using video, using a mirror, using that feedback to help reinforce and continue to optimize. So you're not going to get 100% perfect on your own. No one will just pick up these things. If you will just pick up these things. So using movement as a guide to work those proper muscles, having a base understanding of what the back position should be, what the hip position should be, what the knee position should be, will take care of a lot of that. And then using a coach, using feedback, and using accessory work to help build those areas where you're having trouble. So once you're aware of what good movement is, and then you feel or see on yourself where you're missing that, then that can start to at least lead you down the path to questioning what might be going on.
Nice.
Yeah,
Steve,
I couldn't agree more with that. You know, we've talked a lot and we kind of structured this sort of around the muscles and what they do, but it really comes down to the movement and achieving that whether it's squat or deadlift or whatever, all the different variations you can do. If you go through the movement correctly, like Dave said, you're probably going to be pulling in the muscles correctly. Doesn't matter if you've got big muscles or small muscles, it never worked out. If you get the movement right under low load, and you want to build, you're going to be able to build if you're doing it right. But if you're big and muscly, but you're doing it wrong, like we were saying, you're going to come in and see me or Dave at some point because you're going to break down. So I think just the foundation of moving right is really what should be paramount, and then you can work on, you know, getting the muscles to look really good over time.
awesome guys. So thank you so much. Steve, where can they find you? Website, social media?
Yeah, so social media, you can see me on Instagram and Facebook, SoCal Stem Cell Doc. My office is called HealthLink Medical Center. We're an affiliate of Regenix. So two websites there, regenix.com, REGENEXX.com. And then the website for my main office is healthlinkcenter.com.
Nice. Dave?
Yeah, we're IO Strength Performance across all our channels. So IOStrengthPerformance.com for our website, and IO Strength Performance for Facebook and on Instagram. We're pretty active on there. My wife, too, Pelvic Performance PT. She works more on the women's health, pelvic floor side of things. So if you're dealing with any of those issues, be sure to check her out as well.
We should get her on for the core one that we do at the end of this.
Yep. So,
awesome, guys. So this is going to be week one. We tried to make this live on Facebook, but it's going to end up just being a recording that goes up. Facebook decided to kick me off twice. Every time I wanted to get back on, it wouldn't let me. So this will be week one. Next week, we are going to talk about pushing and pulling, kind of upper body, lower, or upper body push, upper body pull. So we'll kind of do the same format. We'll talk about some of the muscle groups, and then we'll get into the stuff that's more fun that starts to increase performance. And yeah, that's all I got. Hopefully everybody's staying safe through the quarantine and keeping up on your workouts. If you guys have any questions that you want us to make sure we hit on next time, post them up in the comments. Make sure you check these guys out, website, social media, all that stuff. They both post a ton of great stuff. And that's all we got. Thank you guys so much for taking the time today, and I will see you guys next week for week 2.